My dear listener, what if I told you that this battle, yes, the one draining your strength and clouding your clarity, was never meant to define you but to unveil you? What if your weariness is not a sign of failure but the holy tremble before transformation? I welcome you not as a stranger to suffering, but as one of God's chosen, those marked by fire yet preserved for glory. If you've ever prayed in silence, wept in secret, or questioned the weight you carry, this message is for you. Stay with me until the end. There is something sacred waiting to be revealed. In this message, we will step into a realm where theology meets the trembling of human hearts. The title, "This Battle Ends with My Glory on You," is not a poetic phrase. It is a divine declaration. You may be carrying unseen exhaustion, asking, "Why does this battle feel endless? Why do I feel invisible in my faithfulness? Where is God in the delay?" These aren't questions of doubt. They're echoes from the soul reaching for the eternal. You've been taught to endure, but perhaps no one has helped you discern the purpose of the endurance. In this video, we will not offer easy answers. Instead, we will uncover holy ones. We will explore how God's silence is not absence, how delays are not denials, and how the breaking is often the birthplace of glory. You are not being dismissed. You are being developed. And what lies ahead is not just the end of struggle, but the beginning of something sacred resting on you. The Spirit of God is moving not only to comfort, but to commission, and if you felt lost in the waiting, I assure you, you are exactly where glory begins. Listen closely. The unraveling has purpose and the revealing is near. This is more than encouragement. It is an invitation, a sacred path, winding through the very questions your heart dares to whisper. As we journey together, you will not simply be consoled, you will be clarified. This is not the voice of sentiment, it is the sound of summoning. What you're about to hear is not for the faint of heart, but for the faithful soul who's still standing even if trembling. I ask you to stay, to listen, to lean in with the fullness of your spirit, because by the end, something buried will awaken. Something dimmed will burn again. This video isn't merely something to watch. It's something to walk through. It's a mirror and a map, a balm and a beacon. You won't leave it the same. The truth has been waiting to find you. Now let it. Let it speak. Let it shape. Let it send. We begin your journey now. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. There was a time I believed the wardrobe was just a wardrobe, that wood and hinges had no voice, that coats led only to coats. But then came the crack in logic. Then came the stillness behind the silence, the moment a child pressed through what was ordinary and found themselves in the extraordinary. And that, my dear soul, is how faith often begins, not with thunder, but with a whisper, not with arrival, but with wandering curiosity. We don't fall into Narnia by maps. We stumble into it by hunger, by the ache that says there must be more than this. The world will tell you to grow up, to leave behind imagination, to trust only what can be measured. But I have seen a deeper world hiding in plain sight. A place where the snow falls like mercy and a lion waits behind winter's curse. I have walked through long nights where hope froze over, where the white witch ruled with cold lies and silence. I've been Lucy believing in something no one else saw. I've been Edmund chasing comfort and tasting betrayal, and still I found grace waiting for me, not scolding, not shaming, but roaring with redemption. There's something sacred about walking through a land that has forgotten the sound of spring. You begin to understand how weariness can settle into the bones of a soul, how easy it is to crown numbness just to feel protected. And yet that is not where the story ends. You were not made to bow to snow. You were not made to live under frost. You were made to remember the warmth that once sang over you. You were made for Aslan's voice, for resurrection, for thawing. You are not forgotten. You are not too broken. You are not the one who missed the call. You are the one chosen to find the door. The one who dared to follow the tug in your chest, even when no one else heard it. And yes, you've walked alone. Yes, you've been mocked for your wonder. But faith has always looked foolish in the beginning. Noah, David, Mary, Lucy. You are in good company. It wasn't just a story. It was a mirror. Narnia showed us to what we escape into, but what we awaken from. It isn't about escaping reality. It's about uncovering reality's deeper rhythm, the one where spiritual battles rage behind everyday moments, where the lamppost is more than a fixture. It's a promise, a marking, a signal that light still lives where darkness thinks it reigns. There was a stone table once, cold, unrelenting, and blood spilled upon it, not because strength was absent, but because love chose the long road. Do you see it? The lion didn't lose. He surrendered to win. He went silent so your voice could be restored. It was never about punishing the guilty. It was about breaking the curse. That story, the lion's story, is your story too. You are not a slave to shame. You are a citizen of redemption. You stayed. You remained. Through spiritual winter and emotional famine, you kept walking. You kept knocking. You kept whispering prayers when no one else heard. And now heaven leans in. Now the wardrobe opens again, not into fiction but into fullness. This time, not just to see Narnia, but to understand it. To realize that every season of stillness was preparation. Every moment of delay was refinement. The lion has never been far. I need you to know this. You are not too late. You are not too distant. The battle didn't disqualify you. It crowned you. Your pain did not reduce your worth. It revealed your resilience. The enemy tried to freeze your calling, but winter has a limit. Always. And now the thaw begins. Not with noise, but with knowing. Not with performance, but with presence. You are the one who endured. The one who kept the light on. The one who looked at the snow and still waited for spring. And now I declare this over your life. The curse is breaking. The lion is on the move. What once looked like ruins will soon pulse with purpose. And where you once only survived, you will now carry glory. Not by strength alone, but by story. By being seen. By being sent. You are holy ground. Not because you earned it, but because you carry His breath. And even now, as you sit in quietness, as you wonder if the wardrobe still opens, I say yes. Yes, it does. But it no longer opens to prove something to you. It opens to send you through. You've seen enough. Now you carry what you've seen. Not fiction, not fantasy, but truth so profound it needed metaphor to be heard. The lion's roar is in you. The throne He died for He shares with you. Not because you were perfect, but because you remained. This is no longer a story about escaping through fur coats and lamplit woods. It's a story about stepping back into the world we left behind but changed, with eyes that see deeper, with hearts that burn brighter, with courage that doesn't flinch when the White Witch whispers again. This is your Narnian moment. The battle ends not with exhaustion but with glory. And that glory, dear heart, is not far off. It's resting on you, Prince Caspian. There comes a time when what once was true begins to feel like myth. The songs we used to sing become echoes, and the miracles we once witnessed fade into the pages of someone else's memory. That's where we find ourselves in Prince Caspian. A land once ruled by lions and kings has now been buried under silence. Narnia has not died, but she has forgotten who she is. And perhaps, if you are honest, so have you. There are seasons when the spirit grows quiet, not because God has vanished, but because we have, lost in routine, bent beneath delay, numbed by noise. But just because something is hidden does not mean it has ceased to be holy. Just because you've gone unnoticed does not mean you've been unchosen. You are not forgotten. You are not too late. You are not the one left behind in a world that moved on. You are the one whose name still burns on the scroll of heaven. The one for whom the trumpet still sounds. The one whose spirit has not surrendered, only slept. And in this story, like in your own, the time for awakening has come. The children return to Narnia not as innocent explorers, but as ones who have seen glory, and now must relearn how to believe. That is the paradox of spiritual maturity. It doesn't always feel like strength. Sometimes it feels like going back through shadows, trying to remember the shape of light. It wasn't nostalgia. It was restoration. It wasn't regression. It was revelation. Because God never calls you back to shame you. He calls you back to reignite what never stopped being yours. Prince Caspian is not just about reclaiming a throne. It's about recovering a name. The rightful king lives in hiding, not because he is unworthy, but because his world has buried its memory of honor. That may be you today, not without calling, but surrounded by compromise. Not without power, but pressed beneath politics, expectation, survival. But hear this: you are not too broken. You are not too bruised. You are not the mistake of a forgotten lineage. You are the continuation of a promise. And just like Caspian, your crown has been preserved not for comfort, but for war. Not the kind that wounds the flesh, but the kind that reclaims the soul. The kind that draws swords against apathy. The kind that remembers when the world forgot. The kind that stands when others bow to fear. You stayed. You remained. Through silence you listened. Through the fog you waited. And now heaven is calling your name again. You are not the orphan. You are the heir. You are not the missing. You are the marked. The one who carries old blood and new breath. And though the ground may be filled with ruin, your presence is not an accident. You have been placed where you are for such a time as this, not to be hidden, but to help awaken the land. The lion is still moving. You are still chosen. But this path forward is not paved with ease. Aslan returns not in parades, but in glimpses. And that's how the Spirit works. Not always with fireworks, but with footsteps beside you in the dark. You won't always see him first, but your heart will know when you've passed too far without him. Like Lucy, you may have to walk where others won't. You may be called to believe when even your companions doubt. But it is often the smallest, the softest, the last in line who hears him clearest. And when you choose to follow even in the face of ridicule, you shift the course of battle. You are not too small, you are not too simple. You are not someone to be overlooked. You are the vessel of divine movement. And if you've ever asked, why can't they see what I see? Perhaps it is because the lion chose to show you first. Not to make you proud, but to make you lead. There will be moments like in the final stand at Aslan's How, when the enemy mocks your size, your memory, your belief in something ancient. But you do not stand by your own strength. You stand with an invisible army. You war not in your own name, but in the name of the one who breathed stars and promises into existence. And you will win not because you fought perfectly, but because you refused to abandon the fight. You stayed. You remained. You remembered the truth when others rewrote it. You waited for the sound of his roar when the silence stretched long. And now that roar is rising, not just in the distance, but in you, because glory doesn't only return to the land, it returns through the people who never gave up. This is not just a story of reclaiming land. It is the story of recovering identity. And in doing so, you become the evidence that faith never dies, it waits. That purpose never evaporates, it matures. That glory never fades, it returns with fire. The battle you are facing is not against flesh and blood, it is against forgetfulness. against the lie that says your time has passed. It hasn't. The lion is coming through the trees again. He is roaring, not just over Narnia, but over you. And as he roars, your spirit will rise. Your voice will return. Your purpose will burn anew, not with hype, with holiness, not to perform, but to fulfill. And the crown you thought was lost will fit you after all, not because you reached for it, but because you remained faithful when no one saw. You are not a relic. You are a ruler in the making. You are not wandering. You are being summoned. You are not standing in ruins. You are rising in revival. And like Caspian, your name will not be remembered for the war that tried to silence you, but for the glory that followed when you dared to believe again. The Voyage of the Dawn, Treader, 1952. Every journey worth taking begins with a tearing of comfort, of certainty, of the map you thought you understood. You don't sail east by accident. You are drawn there, pulled not by wind, but by whisper. That's what the Dawn Treader was for me. Not a ship of escape, but of return. Return not to where I had been, but to who I was always meant to become. And perhaps, as I speak, you too feel that ache, the one that rises, not from lack, but from the knowledge that you were made for more than the shore. The voyage is not about travel, it is about transformation. We board the ship thinking we are chasing adventure, but heaven is always chasing something deeper, awakening, refinement, surrender. The real journey is not across waters, it's across identity. It wasn't about islands, it was about interiors. You think you're discovering new lands, but you're really discovering forgotten truths in yourself. What you were, what you feared, what you still hope to be. There was a boy once, brash, critical, proud. Eustace his name, and many laughed at his complaints. But I saw myself in him, the one who wore logic like armor, who mocked faith because it threatened control, the one who was swallowed by a dragon, not by accident, but by reflection. You see, transformation never begins with applause. It begins with pain. It begins when the mirror cracks and you are forced to see the beast that bitterness built in you. But it doesn't end there, because mercy doesn't recoil from scales. It draws near, it waits. And one night, when the soul is finally quiet, it begins to peel them away, layer by layer. Not with shame, but with love. That's how Aslan found him, and that's how he finds us. Not when we've fixed the mess, but when we've finally admitted we can't. I've lived long enough to know that most of our dragons aren't visible. They're hidden beneath laughter, competence, and control. But the one who made you never stopped seeing the child underneath. The child who still longs for belonging, who still aches to be held without needing to perform. And when you finally stop running from the pain, you'll find that he's been there, circling your soul the entire time. But the voyage didn't stop with Eustace's undoing. No, the ship kept moving. Because once you've been set free, the journey shifts from rescue to revelation, from healing to hunger. Each island we landed on taught me that the war is rarely out there. It's in here, in the heart that still clutches what it was asked to surrender, in the mind that whispers, am I truly different, or just pretending better? But here's the truth. You are not pretending. You are being reborn. Slowly, deeply, truly. You are not a prisoner to what you were. You are proof that transformation is possible. You are not the sum of your worst season. You are the evidence of grace's reach. You stayed. You remained. You walked through self-exposure and still dared to love again. That is not weakness. That is glory. And even when the journey grew dark, especially when we reached the island where dreams come true, it became clear that some of our worst storms are made of memory. Not every fear has a face. Some come in silence, in the creeping dread that what we most want will slip through our fingers, or that what we most regret will return to haunt us. But the lion is not afraid of your darkness. He does not flinch at your fear. He enters it, commands it, redeems it. When the ship finally reached the end of the world, when Reepicheep, noble and small, rode toward the rising sun, I saw with new eyes. This voyage was never about reaching some far-off place. It was about learning to live with a heart turned eastward, toward light, toward eternity, toward the presence that calls without shouting, that leads without dragging, that heals without humiliating. You are not forgotten. You are not too broken. You are not the one who peaked too soon or arrived too late. You are the one still in the process, still at sea. And that is where glory does its finest work, not on the stage, but in the hidden waters. You are not behind. You are being built. And if you've wondered whether your voyage matters, whether the quiet growth, the private prayers, the lonely obedience have weight, I tell you now they do. You are not drifting. You are being directed. And the same lion who met you in your undoing will meet you in your becoming. You are his, still, always. The Dawn Treader was never about finding new lands. It was about finding the kingdom within. And that is the voyage we all must take, not to escape the world, but to be so changed by the spirit of the voyage that we return to the world carrying its fragrance. You are not just sailing. You are being sent, not for spectacle, but for sacredness. So take heart. The waters may stretch long, the stars may disappear for a season, but the one who called you into the journey has not changed his mind. You are not wandering. You are being prepared. And what awaits you at the world's edge is not the end, but the beginning of everything you were born for. You are not the same. You never will be. You have seen the lion, and once you've seen him, you can never walk the same again. The Silver Chair, 1953. There are prisons built without bars, rooms you can't see but feel, shadows you sit in so long you forget the color of sunlight. That's the terror of the Silver Chair, not its chains, but its silence, its deceit. It whispers lies so patiently, so rhythmically, that you begin to believe captivity is comfort. I've seen it, not only in stories but in souls. And perhaps, if you're honest, you've sat there too, bound not by metal, but by resignation. You didn't surrender in rebellion. You surrendered in exhaustion. But child, hear me now, what bound you doesn't define you. The journey of the Silver Chair is not one of distance, but of depth. It's about descending. Into caves, yes. Into darkness, yes. But more terrifyingly into the caverns of our own hearts. It wasn't about finding a lost prince. It was about remembering the truth when everything else screamed fiction. It was about discernment, about holding on to the voice of Aslan when his words echoed no louder than your own heartbeat. And this, I must tell you, is where real faith lives, not in light, but in loyalty. You are not forgotten. You are not too lost to be led. You are not abandoned in your confusion. You are remembered by name. You are known by sound. Aslan gave Jill 4 signs, and that was enough. He didn't give her a full map. He didn't promise ease. He gave her words, instructions, direction sealed in command. Because in the deepest places, clarity does not come from sight. It comes from trust. That's the wilderness of obedience. You won't always feel inspired, but you can still be accurate. I remember Puddleglum, strange in speech, plain in form, but brave, braver than most kings. Because sometimes it takes more courage to declare truth than to draw a sword, especially when you're the only one still speaking it. When the witch sang her lullaby of doubt, it was Puddleglum who stamped the fire, who stood in smoke, who cried out with tears in his voice, "Even if it isn't real, I'm going to live like it is." And isn't that the essence of real discipleship? to walk as if the promise still breathes, even when you're surrounded by fog. You are not small. You are not silly to hope. You are not foolish to believe. You stayed. You remained. Even when your prayers echoed back cold. Even when the world told you to settle, to adapt, to bow your head beneath the chair of culture or shame or fear. But you did not bow. You still carry the sound of heaven. You still recognize the ring of eternity in your soul. And that, yes, that is your strength. The silver chair teaches us that not all bondage looks like chains. Some looks like comfort, like safety, like the path of least resistance. The prince was not fighting swords, he was fighting suggestion. And that is the battleground many never recognize. But you know the cost of forgetting. You know what it feels like to almost believe the lie, that your life is average, that your story is background, that your anointing was imagined. But it wasn't. It was planted, hidden, protected beneath layers of pain until the time was right to rise again. And the chair, it didn't break because of noise. It broke because someone remembered, someone risked. Someone refused to rewrite the truth just to make peace with their pain. And that is what you are called to now, to remember, to resist, to rise, not by strength alone, but by surrender, by clinging to the word spoken over you even when the winds of doubt sing louder than your faith. You are not a prisoner. You are a prince in process. You are not defined by the nights you doubted, but by the light you still pursued. You don't wear the shame of having been bound. You wear the glory of having been freed. And every crack in your voice that still dares to speak truth shakes the throne of deception. You don't need a crowd to confirm it. You only need the courage to proclaim it. And when the darkness lifts, when you ascend from the deep places back into the light, you won't be the same. You won't speak as one who read about freedom. You will speak as one who broke it open. You won't lead from theory. You will lead from scars, from history, from fire-tested intimacy with the one who never stopped whispering your name. You are not too far gone. You are not too late to be useful. You are not defined by the seasons when you couldn't see. You are defined by the one who saw you anyway. You have not missed the mission. You are still the message. And what you carry now isn't just memory, it's authority. So when the next lie creeps close, remember this. You've already been through the cave. You've already stood before the chair. You've already broken its power once. And you'll never forget the sound of chains hitting stone. That sound lives in you. It will ring in your voice. It will pour from your prayers. And others still caught in the illusion will awaken, not because you told them, but because you became the evidence that freedom is real. This is who you are, not the one who stayed silent, not the one who stayed bound. You are the one who stood. You are the one who remembered. You are the one who came back from the deep carrying light. The Horse and His Boy, 1954. Not every calling begins with a trumpet. Sometimes it starts with a whisper in the dark. Sometimes with a boy alone in a shed, wondering if he belongs anywhere at all. That's how it began for Shasta. Not with glory, but with the ache of being misplaced. With the deep, wordless ache of where do I belong? And if you've ever looked around your life and asked the same, if you've ever felt like your name didn't fit, like your surroundings weren't home, then you know the beginning of this journey better than you think. The road out of bondage is rarely paved. It is dusty, jagged. Sometimes it feels more like running than walking. Shasta didn't leave with confidence. He left with confusion and questions. And so do most of us. It wasn't certainty that carried him. It was desperation, hunger, hope wrapped in fear. But it moved him. And that movement, that sacred trembling step towards something more, that was the beginning of destiny. What makes The Horse and His Boy different from other Narnian stories is this. It is not about entering Narnia from another world. It is about realizing you've been chosen for it from the very start. It is the story of finding your name, not by reaching for it, but by returning to it. And in a world where many try to become someone else to be seen, this is the holiest revelation: you are not who they said you were. You are who He always knew you to be. There is a path between what broke you and what builds you. Shasta walked it. So will you. But do not be discouraged if your journey isn't lit with immediate signs. You are not being overlooked. You are being formed. You are not lost. You are being led often by the one who stays just out of sight, guiding you not by appearance but by presence. There was a moment, hidden quiet, where Shasta, worn from pain, sat beside a lion he didn't recognize. And when he poured out all his sorrows, the lion didn't interrupt. He listened. Then, when the boy had finished, Aslan spoke the words that shook me even as I wrote them. I was the lion that chased, the lion that protected, the lion that carried. And oh, how often we think God is distant, when He is simply hidden in the folds of our story, waiting for the right moment to reveal that we were never alone. You are not forgotten. You are not too broken. You are not the sum of your fear. You are seen, known, carried. And just like Shasta, what you thought was chaos was actually coordination. What you called bad timing was divine sequence. You stayed. You remained. When it would have been easier to stop, you kept walking. And though it felt random, the path was already written, not with ease, but with glory. I've learned that God rarely explains everything at once. He leads step by step, left turns that make no sense, delays that feel like detours. But then suddenly you realize He's led you not only to the right place, but into the right version of yourself. The you who wouldn't have existed without the long road, without the battle, without the hidden lion behind the thorns. You are not what you escaped. You are what you endured. You are not defined by what you ran from. You are marked by what you ran toward, even when you didn't fully understand it. That longing in your chest wasn't random. It was the echo of purpose pulling you home. Pulling you not just into a new location, but into your true identity. There's something sacred about realizing you were royalty all along. Shasta was a prince before he ever sat on a throne. He just didn't know it yet. And the same may be true of you. You've been trying to prove yourself, earn your way, and make yourself worthy. But the truth is, you were chosen before you even knew you needed to be. You didn't stumble into significance. You were born into it, crafted for it, named by the one who wastes nothing. You are not second best. You are not an afterthought. You are not just surviving. You are being positioned. You are being called out of the shadows, not to be seen for vanity's sake, but to be recognized as the vessel you truly are. A vessel of purpose, of presence, of power that does not shout, but shines. And when you walk into your calling, when you step into the place that once felt impossible, don't be surprised if the path that led you there looks like pain. Because glory often grows in the soil of sorrow. Because divine timing feels like delay until it unfolds. Because He was always the lion. Even when you didn't know it, you stayed. You remained. You didn't quit in the quiet. You didn't retreat in the confusion. You followed the tug. You believed even when belief felt thin. And now, just like the boy who once didn't know his name, you will walk into a moment where everything makes sense, where every detour draws a straight line, where every battle becomes a crown. You are not a runaway. You are a royal. You are not just a survivor of your past. You are a steward of a future only God could have prepared. The road was real. The fear was real. But so was the lion. So was the calling. So is the crown. And now you walk head high, spirit clear, not because you figured it all out, but because you finally understood you were never lost. You were always being led. The Magician's Nephew, 1955. Every world begins in silence, not absence expectation, not void invitation. Before Narnia bloomed with trees and rivers, before its skies were painted with stars, it was still, and into that stillness came a voice, not hurried, not loud, just true. And with every word, life answered. I remember that moment not as a scene from fiction, but as a reflection of something real, something eternal, because each of us too was born from that kind of silence. From a sacred breath, from a word that did not just speak over us but into us. That kind of beginning leaves a mark. The Magician's Nephew is not merely a prequel, it is a revelation, a story about first things, about how something holy can rise even from brokenness, about how curiosity can become both a curse and a calling, and perhaps more than anything it is a story about choices, the kind you make when no one's watching, the kind that ripple not only through your life, but through everything you touch. It wasn't just about magic rings or ancient trees. It was about who you become when power is placed in your hands. When you stand in a room of sleeping kings, in a land on the edge of ruin, and must decide whether to obey the quiet conviction or chase the thrill of control. That's where Diggory found himself. That's where we all do. Sooner or later, we all walk into a place that tests the posture of our soul more than the strength of our will. You are not the sum of your temptations. You are not the mistake you almost made. You are the one who still hears the difference between the voice of wonder and the voice of warning. And even if you've taken a wrong step, even if your fingers reached where they shouldn't have, grace is not withdrawn. You stayed. You remain. You didn't stop at regret. You walked toward repentance. And that, my child, is what changes everything. What struck me most about that story, about Aslan creating the world with nothing but song, was how gently glory moves. It doesn't compete for attention. It doesn't demand applause. It simply is. And when it moves, you don't need to be told to stand still. You feel it, in your bones, in your breath. And suddenly, even the most cynical parts of you go quiet. Because this is what you were made for. Not noise, not striving, not performance, presence. You are not forgotten. You are not too broken. You are not the one who missed their moment. You are the one for whom the world was always waiting, for whom Eden still echoes. You were created not only for a task, but for delight, for wonder, for awe that doesn't fade when the music ends. And though your world may not look new right now, though your surroundings feel worn and weary, the one who sings galaxies into being is still speaking. And when he sends you like he sent Diggory, it won't be with fanfare. It will be with trust, with a seed, with a task that feels too small to matter, but in that task, in that obedience, is the beginning of redemption. Diggory didn't heal Narnia with a sword. He did it by planting a tree, quietly, faithfully, and what grew from that act of surrender shielded the land for generations. You think your obedience is small? Heaven sees legacy. You are not without purpose. You are not wandering aimlessly. Every yes you give, even the trembling ones, builds a world you may never fully see. But the fruit will testify. The air will shift. And the enemy who thought he had won will stand in the shadow of what you grew from ashes, from silence, from surrender. Even Jadis the White Witch didn't enter the story with ice. She entered with ambition, with a hunger for dominion dressed as wisdom. And that is how evil often moves, not through thunder, but through suggestion. You must know the difference. You must remember the song, because not every powerful thing is divine. Not every shining thing is sacred. Discernment isn't about being suspicious. It's about being aligned. And you, dear one, have been given ears to hear. You are not defenseless. You are not destined for confusion. You have been equipped with memory, with spirit, with the same breath that sang Narnia into being. And when you walk into chaos, you won't need to shout. You'll only need to speak what he said, and life will answer. It always does. You stayed. You remained. Through the mystery, through the murkiness. When others scoffed at the invisible, you still leaned in. And now you carry not just the truth, but the tone of the one who spoke it. You don't need to build empires to be faithful. You only need to plant the thing he gave you in the place he whispered at the time he appointed. That's how worlds begin. So do not despise your quiet place. Do not underestimate your hidden season. Do not dismiss the seeds in your hand. They are not empty. They are not forgotten. They are the beginning of someone's healing, the protection of someone's future, the answer to someone's prayer. You are not small. You are seen. You are not late. You are led. And just like in that first dawn, when song split silence and light met dust, so too will your obedience birth beauty. Because the God who created Narnia with a voice still speaks, and he has not stopped calling your name. The Last Battle, 1956. Not every ending is what it seems. Some doors don't close, they open from the inside. Some deaths are not departures but arrivals. And when I wrote The Last Battle, I did not write it with sorrow. I wrote it with awe, with trembling fingers and a full heart, because I saw it. I saw how the end of a world was not a collapse but a calling home. And maybe, just maybe, you felt that call too, not to escape this world, but to live in it with your eyes turned toward eternity. There's a battle at the edge of every age, not always with swords, sometimes with silence, sometimes with deception so carefully crafted it mimics truth. In the last days of Narnia, the enemy didn't conquer with might. He conquered with imitation, a false Aslan, a borrowed name, a voice twisted just enough to sound holy while sowing fear. And that is how the darkness often moves, not by denying God outright, but by impersonating him, by blurring the lines until obedience feels oppressive and holiness feels optional. You are not the confused. You are the called. You are not abandoned in the fog. You are anchored by the truth. And though this generation may dance with distraction, though false banners wave high, and counterfeit wisdom fills the air, you still hear the voice of the true King. You stayed. You remained. Even when the world began to crumble, even when others bowed to the lies they whispered Tash is Aslan, and called it progress, but you remembered the face of the real lion. The battle was never about land. It was always about loyalty. Who you trust when truth costs you. Who you follow when comfort walks the other way. And in that final hour when Narnia stood on the edge of night, it wasn't the powerful who prevailed. It was the faithful, the ones who remembered, the ones who refused to trade the eternal for the easy. You are not too broken to endure. You are not too weary to be used. The war has taken its toll, I know. But what the enemy meant to wear you down, heaven has used to make you ready, not for more striving, but for more glory. Not to prove yourself, but to prepare yourself for the final chapter that only God could write. It wasn't about destruction. It was about revelation. The stable that looked small on the outside opened into a world wider than imagination. And that too is a mirror, because this life, this pain, this waiting, this fighting often feels narrow, cramped. You look around and wonder if this is all, but it's not. There's more, deeper up, further in. There's a kingdom rising even now, unseen but not unreal, and every act of obedience you've carried in secret has built it. You are not forgotten. You are not misplaced in history. You are the ones the prophets spoke of, the ones standing at the tipping point of time. And though your armor may be dented, though your heart may be tired, your faith still burns. And that flame, even if it flickers, is enough to light the path forward. I wrote about Emeth the Calormain, who had served another name, yet whose heart had longed for truth. And when he met Aslan, the lion said, "All you did for him, I count as done to me." And it shattered my understanding of boundaries. Because heaven reads hearts, not headlines. And grace doesn't ask for a perfect theology. It asks for a true posture. You are not disqualified by your questions. You are not disowned by your wrestlings. You are my child, and I see beyond your doubt. I see your direction. So, when the last trumpet sounds, whether in the heavens or in the depths of your soul, know this: you are ready. Not because you feel strong, but because you've remained faithful. Not because you have answers, but because you've anchored in the one who is the answer. You are not the one who quit. You are the one who endured. And what's coming is not vague reward. It is fullness, fulfillment, the kind that redefines reality. I saw it, even if just in part. The light that doesn't fade, the fields that don't end, the voices that sing not out of duty, but out of recognition. Because home is not a place, it is a presence. And when you walk into it, you'll realize you've been walking toward it all along. You stayed. You remained. Through war and whisper, through deception and delay, you chose the lion's voice. And now the veil grows thin. The world may not see it, but you feel it. The pull, the pulse, the pace of eternity. You are not walking toward an ending. You are running into your beginning. And this is the final truth. The one I clung to as I wrote the last lines. The story doesn't finish when the pages run out. It begins when the final word is spoken and the great author smiles. What lies ahead is not more of the same. It is a chapter where every sorrow is answered with joy, every ache with presence, every tear with light. You are not standing in ruins. You are standing at the gate. This is not goodbye. This is glory. Further up, further in, forever. Mere Christianity, 1952. I did not begin with belief. I began with resistance, with arguments sharpened by intellect and questions no one dared to ask aloud. Not because I hated God, but because I feared being deceived. Because truth, if it exists at all, should not require blind surrender. It should be able to stand. And I demanded that it stand under fire. That was how Mere Christianity was born, not from certainty, but from collision. Not from comfort, but from war. The bombs falling outside during those broadcast nights were not louder than the battle happening inside me. It wasn't about religion. It was about reality. It wasn't about proving a denomination. It was about discovering a person. Not a philosophy to admire, but a presence to encounter. I had tried every road, reason, pleasure, logic, detachment, and yet none of them led home. Until the road that began at Calvary made its way into my mind and refused to leave. You are not weak for having questions. You are not too skeptical to be sought. You are not disqualified by your doubts. If anything, you are closer than you realize, because those who ask deeply are often the ones being pursued most relentlessly. The hound of heaven does not waste his chase on those content with shadows. You stayed. You remained. Even when certainty failed, your heart kept knocking on the door of meaning. Mere Christianity was never a sermon. It was a searchlight. For those lost in the fog of modernity, for those drowning in contradiction, for those who couldn't reconcile the ache for goodness with the reality of evil. I spoke not as a saint, but as a survivor, as one who had stared long into the abyss of unbelief and found that even the void speaks his name when you're quiet enough to listen. The law of human nature, the tug toward justice, the unspoken standard we all betray. These are not abstractions, they are clues, signposts, echoes of Eden hidden in the conscience of every man and woman. We argue not because morality is invented, but because it is remembered. Our rage at injustice proves that we were made for something more, something right, something good enough to recognize even in its absence. You are not a mistake of matter. You are not a random collection of dust and time. You are the image of something eternal. You are a mirror of the divine. And every time you feel the tension between who you are and who you long to be, that is not failure, that is evidence. You are not just thinking, you are remembering. And that memory leads us not only to logic, but to longing, to that quiet ache behind every great story, every broken heart, every sunset that makes you cry without knowing why. This longing, too, is not an illusion. It is the proof that we were not made for this world alone. For if nothing in this world can satisfy it, perhaps we were made for another. You are not forgotten. You are not too broken. You are not left behind by those who seem to believe more easily. You are being drawn. And it is not an argument that will save you. It is a person. The kind who doesn't answer every question with data, but with presence. The kind who breaks into the logic you built like a fortress and sits with you in silence until you know you're no longer alone. It was never about winning debates. It was always about wounding pride, about replacing self-sufficiency with surrender, and not surrender as defeat, but as doorway into the kind of love that does not flinch at your doubts or demand instant perfection, into the kind of faith that walks slowly beside your wrestling and whispers, "I'm still here." You stayed. You remained. When your mind couldn't carry it, your spirit leaned in. When the arguments grew cold, you still listened for something deeper. And now that something is stirring again, not to dismantle your reason, but to fulfill it. Oh, for reason is not the enemy of faith. It is its servant. And when reason has run its course, a revelation remains. The truest things are not always the loudest. Sometimes they come as a still small voice. Sometimes they come as a whisper that cuts through 1,000 shouts. That voice does not compete for attention, it commands it. It's not a voice that drags, it draws. And it's drawing you still. You are not an orphan in this universe. You are not a wanderer without meaning. The moral law you feel, the ache you carry, the hunger that wakes you in the quiet hours, they all point home. And the Christ I found, or rather the Christ who found me, is not a metaphor. He is the center, the cornerstone, the answer to the question that every soul dares to ask. Beneath all its other question, am I loved? Am I known? Does truth care enough to come close? The answer is yes. And not just yes in theory. Yes in flesh. Yes in blood. Yes in wounds. Yes in resurrection. And that is why Christianity is not merely true, it is necessary. For without it, the story of your life remains unfinished. With it, the pieces begin to sing. You are not just thinking, you are awakening. You are not just reasoning, you are returning. And the one who shaped your mind in the beginning is still speaking, still calling, still waiting on the other side of your yes. This is mere Christianity, not religion, not performance, but reality wrapped in reason, lit by love, carried by grace. Welcome home. The Screwtape Letters, 1942. It began not with a sermon, but with a whisper, a twisted voice, sharp, clever, and eerily familiar. I heard it not in fantasy, but in the corners of my own thinking. The casual cynicism, the quiet doubt, the clever excuses for delay, distraction, and disobedience. And I wondered, what if we could eavesdrop on the strategies of darkness? What if the veil between our choices and the spiritual realm behind them was pulled back, not with fear, but with clarity. That is where the Screwtape Letters was born, not as satire for amusement, but as mirror and warning. It wasn't about devils with horns. It was about patterns, about thoughts that slide in unnoticed, about the steady erosion of purpose, not through sin that shocks, but sin that soothes. Because the greatest danger to your soul is not a loud fall. It is a quiet drift, the kind you don't notice until the shore is gone and you don't remember how to swim back. You are not weak because you struggle. You are not disqualified because the battle feels relentless. You are not the only one who has heard the voice of condemnation, pretending to be logic. The enemy is subtle, sophisticated. He doesn't demand that you rebel. He only hopes you will forget. Forget who you are. Forget what matters. Forget the voice that once called your name with fire. You stayed. You remain. And that, dear soul, is already a victory. Because the goal of the enemy is not to make you fall in one grand collapse. His aim is to dull you, to distract you, to keep you busy with everything but eternity, to make sure you never look up long enough to see the battle you were born into. Screwtape was not written to entertain. It was written to expose, to reveal how the smallest compromises stack like bricks until you're walled in from wonder, how a little bitterness, a little pride, a little comfort taken at the wrong time can blind you to glory. And yet, beneath all that strategy, there is a trembling. Hell fears those who awaken, who remember, who name the schemes and renounce them. You are not forgotten. You are not too broken. You are not a puppet of your impulses. You are a child of light. And even if the war has worn you down, even if you've nodded at the wrong voice more times than you'd like to admit, the fact that you are still listening, still seeking, still hoping, that is proof. You are not lost. You are being led. It wasn't just a book about temptation. It was a confession, a cry, a way to say, I've seen the traps, and I know they're real. I've seen the pride that disguises itself as spiritual confidence. I've seen the fear that hides behind careful planning. I've seen the way we trade the eternal for the immediate day after day, while still calling ourselves faithful. But faith is not the absence of struggle. Faith is the refusal to bow in the middle of it. Faith is seeing the enemy's shadow and still choosing to stand in the light. You are not defined by your battles. You are defined by the one who stands beside you in them, the one who sees past your failures and still calls you mine. You stayed. You remain. When others gave up and called it realism, you still dared to believe in resurrection. When the whisper told you you'll never change, you still opened the word. When the temptation felt relentless, you clung to grace even if with trembling hands. That is not weakness. That is warfare, and you are winning more than you know. What I discovered through Screwtape is that spiritual warfare is rarely theatrical. It's ordinary. It's the impulse to scroll instead of pray, to hold a grudge instead of forgive, to rationalize what you once called sin, to numb instead of kneel. The enemy does not need you wicked. He only needs you distracted. But heaven does not retreat when you fall short. Heaven advances when you lift your head again, when you whisper help, when you repent without shame, when you worship not because you feel holy, but because you believe He is. Yes, that is what terrifies hell. You are not alone. You are not too far gone. The schemes that have stalked you are already unraveling at the sound of truth. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to be awake, and you are. I see it. I feel it. The tug in your heart, the clarity rising from beneath the fog. That's not guilt. That's grace. And when you read these letters, when you hear Screwtape's voice twist and plot, you begin to see yourself more clearly. Not in condemnation, but in conviction. you start to recognize the sacredness of small choices, the holiness of habit, the miracle of still believing in a cynical world. You are not who the enemy said you are. You are not bound by his vocabulary. You are not what your worst day claimed you to be. You are the redeemed, the restored, the returned. And even now, the Spirit whispers louder than screw tape ever could. This one belongs to me. You stayed. You remained. You resisted in silence. You clung to truth in weakness. And now that truth is rising again in you, not as argument, as armor, not as intellect, as intimacy. You are not a pawn. You are a warrior. Not because you never fall, but because you always rise. This is the real letter, not from hell, but from home. And the signature on the bottom reads, not screw tape, but the Savior who never stopped fighting for you, and who never will. The problem of pain, 1940. Pain is a question that doesn't ask for answers, it demands them. Not from philosophers, but from God. Not in theory, but in midnight hours. I did not write the problem of pain because I had mastered my agony. I wrote it because I had tried for years to outrun it, to reason past it, to hold belief at arm's length, so I wouldn't have to confront the contradiction. How could a good God allow suffering? The answer did not come in thunder. It came in surrender, slowly, through the scarred prayers and stained pages. It wasn't about finding peace with pain. It was about discovering purpose within it. Not easy purpose, not poetic purpose, but a holy one. One that did not erase suffering but refused to let it be wasted. You are not alone in asking. You are not weak for wondering. You are not too broken to question the very God you worship. I did too. I stood in the ruins of faith more times than I care to confess, and yet something kept calling me deeper, beyond comfort, beyond explanation, into mystery, into majesty. Pain, I learned, is not the enemy. Indifference is. Numbness is. The lie that tells us we are abandoned in the ache. But pain, real pain, is evidence that you still feel, that the heart still beats, that your spirit has not settled for apathy. It was never about whether we suffer. It was about what suffering reveals. And that revelation, though costly, is sacred. You are not cursed because you're hurting. You are not forgotten because the healing hasn't come. You are not disqualified because you've grown weary of waiting. You are human. And more than that, you are His. And the God who allowed pain to touch your life is the same God who wept when it touched His Son. This is not cruelty. This is a crucible. The contrast between a God of love and a world of sorrow does not cancel belief, it clarifies it. It forces us to wrestle not just with suffering but with sovereignty. It demands that we look past what we see and anchor in what we know, that we understand love not as indulgence but as refinement, not as comfort but as calling. You stayed. You remain. When others walked away, when the silence stretched too long, when the prayers returned unanswered, you still leaned in, even if only with a whisper. That whisper mattered. It moved heaven. Because in the economy of the kingdom, faith isn't measured by volume, it's measured by endurance. It wasn't punishment, it was pruning. It wasn't abandonment, it was alignment. Pain stripped me of illusions, of self-sufficiency, of theological convenience, and what remained was something raw, something holy, a kind of dependence that didn't resent God for not explaining, but adored Him for not leaving. You are not the sum of what hurt you. You are not the echo of your worst day. You are the one who kept breathing when it felt easier to shut down. The one who woke up again. Who lifted your eyes again. That is not small, that is strength. In my pain, I saw that God is not a distant observer. He is not the orchestrator of tragedy, but the redeemer of it. He does not cause the ache, but He calls through it. And often it's in the silence that we begin to hear Him best. Because pain silences the noise. It humbles the proud. It awakens the soul. I wrote The Problem of Pain not to defend God, but to point toward Him. To show that love, if it is truly holy, must also be willing to wound, if that wound wakes us. God is not safe, but He is good. He is not predictable, but He is present. You are not being punished. You are being purified, not in fire meant to destroy, but in fire meant to define. There is gold in you, deep, hidden, and pain has a way of drawing it out, slowly, through surrender, through time. You stayed. You remained. When theology wasn't enough, when logic collapsed. When others gave trite answers and walked away, you stayed in the question. And that, my child, is where the glory begins. In the place where God doesn't just fix you, He forms you. It wasn't meaningless. It wasn't wasted. Every tear was counted. Every sleepless night remembered. And what felt like divine silence was in truth divine shaping. Because sometimes God speaks not in answers, but in presence. Not in loud solutions, but in quiet companionship. Pain is not the opposite of grace. It's often the path through which grace flows deeper, softer, stronger. And though I once thought it was an argument to be answered, I now see it as a sacred invitation to know Him not only as Creator but as Comforter, not only as Ruler but as Redeemer. You are not abandoned. You are not too late to be healed. You are not too tired to begin again. The fire has not destroyed your faith. It has exposed it. You are more than your pain. You are chosen. You are refined, but you are loved. And the God who allowed you to feel this deeply has never stopped writing your story. This chapter may ache, but it will not be the final one. There is resurrection ahead, restoration, and one day when the curtain lifts and the full weight of glory is revealed, you will see it. The scars you carry will shine. The pain you survived will speak. And the love you questioned will be the very light that crowns your head. You will not be remembered for what broke you. You will be remembered for how you walked through fire and came out gold. Miracles 1947. Miracles do not arrive with fanfare. They do not always burst in with thunder or announce themselves with lightning. Most often they slip quietly into the edges of our reality, unassuming, unseen, by most unmistakable to those who've been watching. When I first began to write miracles, it wasn't to prove the spectacular. It was to make space for it. Not to defend divine acts against science, but to show how science itself, when rightly understood, becomes the canvas on which God writes wonder. It wasn't about denying natural law. It was about recognizing that there is a lawgiver beyond it, a voice that spoke the very structure of physics into being, and who, when He chooses, bends the fabric of time not to break it, but to reveal His presence within it. That was the invitation, not to suspend reason, but to expand it. You are not foolish for believing in things you cannot explain. You are not naive for hoping in a world that mocks faith. You are not disqualified because you've asked again and again, "Why doesn't the miracle come for me?" You are the very one miracles were meant to reach: the weary, the longing, the watcher in the night, who still keeps the lamp burning even when the winds howl. You stayed. You remained. When others gave up and called it coincidence, when others abandoned prayer and called it practicality, you still listened. You still waited. Not perfectly, but faithfully. And that is the soil where miracles grow, not in control, but in surrender. Miracles, I discovered, are not God's way of showing off. They are His way of drawing near. They are signs, yes, but signs that point beyond healing, beyond provision, beyond power. They point to the one who walks across waters not to impress, but to meet the desperate, the one who multiplies bread not to entertain but to feed the hungry soul, the soul who had nothing left to bring except need. You are not forgotten. You are not too broken. You are not passed over by heaven's hand. The silence you've endured is not the absence of God. It is often the preparation for His arrival. And when He does move, when the veil between worlds thins, it is not always where the spotlight shines. It is where humility kneels. It wasn't about proving that God could interrupt the natural. It was about recognizing that He already has. The greatest miracle was not water turned to wine, but word turned to flesh. That the eternal entered time, that the divine walked dusty roads and wept at tombs. That is where all miracles begin, not in spectacle, but in incarnation. And if God could do that, if He could stoop so low as a womb, as a manger, as a cross, then no intervention in your life is beneath Him. No diagnosis too fixed, no door too shut, no past too scarred. You are not beyond reach. You are the reason heaven broke through. You stayed. You remained. Through the waiting, through the whispering voice that said, maybe it won't happen. Maybe it was never real. And still you prayed. You hoped. You opened your eyes each morning and still believed that something more was possible. That faith, quiet, raw, unresolved, is the truest kind. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a canvas for glory, a place where eternity has marked a target. And whether the miracle comes like a flash or like a slow, unfolding sunrise, it will come. It already has. For sometimes the miracle is not the storm that stops, but the heart that stands in the middle of it and says, God is still good. I do not believe in miracles because I need magic. I believe in them because I've seen how barren the world becomes without wonder, because I've watched what happens when we dismiss what we can't dissect. We lose awe, we lose worship, we lose the sacred. You are not called to explain everything. You are called to behold it, to be a witness, to be the one who still believes that dead things can live, that broken things can shine. That time doesn't limit what God can do. It only sets the stage for when He will do it. And when the miracle comes, and yes, it will, whether through healing or hope, whether through the shift in circumstance or the shift in spirit, you will know it was not random. You will know it was always Him, writing gently, moving deeply, turning pages even when you couldn't see the ink. You are not forgotten. You are not too late. The miracle is not only coming, it is already moving toward you. Maybe not in the way you imagined, maybe not in the timeline you set, but in the fullness of His goodness, the miracle is already unfolding. And when it arrives, you won't need to force belief. You'll recognize it. You'll whisper, it was Him all along. You stayed, you remained. And now miracle becomes your inheritance, not because you earned it, but because you are His. You are the one He came for. You are the one He still comes for. Not with noise, but with knowing. Not with hype, but with holiness. This is what miracles was always meant to be. Not a defense of the supernatural, but a declaration that the veil is thinner than we think. That wonder is waiting. And the God who made the stars is still bending low into time, into your story, into this very moment, to remind you you are not too broken. You are not too small. You are not too late. You are my child, and I still do miracles. Out of the Silent Planet 1938, I once believed space was empty, cold, unreachable, a vacuum of silence stretching infinitely in all directions. But when I wrote Out of the Silent Planet, I wasn't charting stars, I was tracing the silence of Earth. A silence not born of distance but of rebellion. Not because God stopped speaking, but because we stopped listening. It wasn't about Mars. It was about Malacandra, about a world unfallen, untouched by the disease we've grown too used to. a place where the word sin doesn't echo because it never arrived. And when Ransom landed there, what he found wasn't aliens but clarity, a reminder of what Earth once was and what it still longs to become. You are not a stranger to silence. You are not too broken to hear beauty again. You have lived among noise, among fractured truths and synthetic light. But even here, even now, you felt it. That pull, that quiet ache that says there must be more than this. You are not forgotten. You are not cast out from the choir. You are the one he still sings over. The silent planet is not silent because it was never loved. It is silent because it chose its own song. And when a planet breaks from the music of its maker, it doesn't lose existence, it loses harmony. That's the truth, buried inside fiction. That's the melody beneath every moment of wonder. And maybe, just maybe, that's what you've heard in your loneliest moments. Not despair, but homesickness for heaven. You stayed. You remained, even when the silence was loud, even when the sky offered no answer, even when logic said, "Give up," your heart whispered, "Look up." That is not delusion. That is faith. That is the language of Malacandra still pulsing in your soul. There is a holiness in contrast. Ransom saw it. He tasted the difference between a world still aligned and a world still lost. He watched how creatures bowed, not in fear, but in awe. How life did not clamor to survive, but flourished to reflect. And in that place, he remembered something he never knew he'd forgotten. So do you. In the quiet, in the aching, in the space between words, you remember. Not facts, but something deeper. You are not just flesh wrapped in thought. You are soul wrapped in light. You were born with the memory of another world pressed into your being. That's why this one never quite satisfies. It wasn't meant to. And though Earth is still silent, the invitation has not been revoked. The door is not closed. The music is still playing faint beneath the static. And those who listen, truly listen, will hear it again. Not in fiction, but in faith. You are not the silence. You are the song returning. You are not the one forgotten in space. You are the one chosen to echo the glory of a God who never stopped calling. And though the stars may feel far, the word is near. He still speaks. He still sings. And his voice, though ancient, is reaching you now. Perelandra, 1943. There is a silence more haunting than emptiness. It is the silence that falls before temptation speaks. Perelandra began with that silence, with a world untouched, floating islands of beauty untouched by sin, unmarred by rebellion. And then into that stillness a whisper, a presence, a choice. And it was there I saw not just a fictional Eden, but the fragile battlefield of every human heart. It wasn't just a cosmic tale, it was a mirror, a parable of what could have been, of what still can be, because Perelandra is not just another world, it is a picture of innocence in real time. Not innocence as ignorance, but as fierce trust. And that kind of trust is never passive. It fights, it resists, it holds ground in silence when all hell mocks from the shadows. You are not naive for choosing obedience. You are not too broken to stand when temptation circles again. You are not disqualified because the battle is loud within you. The louder the lie, the more heaven must believe you are worth tempting. You are not weak. You are the one who still listens for the voice of truth when every other sound demands your fall. You stayed, you remained. Even when the enemy returned, persistent, clever, familiar, you did not give in. You may have doubted, you may have trembled, but you did not retreat. And that is where glory begins, not in perfection, in perseverance. Ransom's journey wasn't one of might, it was one of submission. He did not come to conquer the planet, he came to stand in a gap, to protect the Queen, not with charm or force, but with presence. He was not a hero in the classical sense. He was a witness, a protector, a reminder that sometimes the greatest battles are won, not with swords, but with sacred endurance. And you too are not called to impress. You are called to remain. You are not asked to be eloquent. You are asked to be faithful. You are not expected to be immune to temptation. You are empowered to resist it, not in your own strength, but in the one who stood before you and still stands with you. The garden you were meant to guard may not look like Paralandra. It may be your marriage, your mind, your calling, but whatever it is, the enemy still uses the same tactics: subtle questions, slight twists, flattery that sounds like wisdom. But you were not left defenseless. You were given discernment. You were given truth. You were given a voice that still says, "This is the way. Walk in it." You are not forgotten. You are not too broken. You are not the one who failed too many times. You are the one he still trusts with a sacred mission: to protect what is pure, to speak what is true, to remain when retreat would feel easier. And when the darkness lifts, when the lie is finally silenced, you will see that your obedience did not only preserve innocence, it invited glory. It broke cycles. It rewrote what could have become another fall. You are not passive in this story. You are the turning point. You stayed. You remain. And that choice, yes, even that quiet, unseen choice, is ringing through eternity still. That hideous strength 1945 evil doesn't always come with horns. Sometimes it arrives in suits, with polished words and progressive ideals. Sometimes it hides in systems, in sterile halls, in smiling faces that promise progress while slowly dismantling the soul. That's what I wanted to show in that hideous strength, not fantasy, but reflection. Not a distant world, but the world we already live in, stripped bare of illusion. It wasn't a tale about politics. It was about power, about how truth bends when people stop asking where the power flows from, when knowledge is prized above wisdom, when science divorces itself from spirit, and when ambition outgrows humility. Darkness finds a throne. You are not paranoid for sensing the tension. You are not broken because the world feels upside down. You are not alone in your resistance. The war you feel inside, the war between what's easy and what's right, what's clever and what's true, that war is real. And you are not losing. You are awakening. You stayed. You remained. Even when your convictions cost you community, even when you were called outdated, irrelevant, naive, you still clung to something deeper, something older than the culture, wiser than the headlines, holier than the systems built to silence it. That is not weakness. That is clarity. Mark and Jane, two people pulled into a battle they didn't expect. One seduced by relevance, the other softened by revelation, but both had to face the same truth. You cannot stay neutral when the spiritual begins to bleed into the visible. Sooner or later, you must choose, not just what side you're on, but who you will become. And that choice, it wasn't just theirs. It's yours. It's ours. We are living in a world where good and evil no longer wear distinct uniforms, where the serpent now speaks through algorithm and boardrooms and subtle academic decay. But you are not defenseless. You are not directionless. You carry light. Even if the battle has made you question its worth, it wasn't an attack on intellect. It was a call to realignment, to recover what knowledge was always meant to be: a servant of truth, not its replacement. To remember that wisdom begins not with data but with reverence, that holiness is not irrelevant. It is resistance. You are not forgotten. You are not too small to matter. The very fact that darkness has tried to confuse you, isolate you, distract you, is evidence that you're dangerous to its plans. You are not who fear says you are. You are who God called before the first lie was ever spoken. And even now, that calling still stands. You stayed. You remained. And even if your hands are shaking now, your heart is steady. And that's what counts. That's what shakes the gates. Not perfection, but presence. The courage to remain in truth when all the world rushes toward cleverness without conscience. This is not just a story. It's a map, a warning, a reminder that the battle is real, but so is the victory. You are not alone in this, and you are not powerless. Heaven still reigns, truth still breathes, and your obedience, quiet though it may seem, is shaking something deep. You are not too late, you are not too tired. You are still the one He calls, the one He sends, the one He trusts. And even now, the strength rising in you is not hideous. It is holy. Heaven and hell are not just destinations. They are trajectories, movements of the soul that begin long before we die. When I wrote The Great Divorce, I was not mapping geography. I was exposing desire. I saw that our choices are not simply moral, they are eternal. That heaven is not forced on those who do not want it, and hell is not thrust upon those who seek God. Each is a culmination of what we've chosen to love. It wasn't about punishment. It was about permission. God does not send us into darkness. We walk there step by step, clinging to pride, resentment, or comfort, even when the gates of paradise stand open. That is the great sorrow of hell, not that it is locked from the outside, but that its doors remain open and no one wants to leave. You are not beyond redemption. You are not too hardened to be reached. You are not stuck in your shadows. If the soul is still moving, if even one whisper of surrender remains, there is still light ahead. And you, dear one, are not alone in the valley of decision. Heaven has always chased hearts like yours. You stayed. You remain. When bitterness whispered its case, when the past reminded you how unfair it all seemed, you still turned your face toward grace. Even if just slightly, even if the motion felt imperceptible, that movement matters. Heaven notices. Eternity pivots on moments like that. What I saw in that dream, the bus from hell to heaven, the ghosts that chose to stay shadows rather than let go of lesser loves, it wasn't fantasy. It was diagnosis. We are not souls trapped in bodies. We are souls building their future now. Every act of forgiveness, every moment of repentance is a stepping stone into glory. But my journey did not start with doctrine. It began with desire, with absence, with a joy that haunted me. Surprised by Joy was not just my autobiography, it was my awakening. I spent years resisting belief. I had all the arguments, all the skepticism, and yet something kept pulling at the edges of my certainty. Something beautiful, something unbearable. It wasn't pleasure. It wasn't comfort. It was longing. A piercing joy that came without warning, vanished without explanation, and left a trail of ache in its wake. And I began to realize this was not a hunger to be filled by anything in this world. This was homesickness. And the moment I admitted that, the door cracked open. You are not foolish for your longing. You are not too intellectual to believe. You are not disqualified by your questions. You are the very kind of soul that grace pursues. The ones who dig, the ones who dare to doubt honestly, the ones who dare to be honest about the ache. It wasn't logic that saved me. It was surrender. Not surrender as defeat, but as recognition. I saw that the story I had dismissed was the only one wide enough to explain my joy. That the Jesus I had ignored was the only one near enough to explain my ache. You stayed. You remained. Even when the questions outnumbered the answers. Even when joy felt more like ache than satisfaction. Still, you kept listening. You kept watching the horizon. And that is where He met me, not in a cathedral, but in the quiet moment when I admitted that I could not explain my own soul without Him. But even that surrender did not prepare me for the sorrow that would come later, when I lost joy, not the feeling but the woman. The love I never expected to find taken from me like a page torn mid-sentence. A grief observed was not written to help others. It was written because I could not breathe. It wasn't theory anymore. It was agony. I had written about suffering with poise and the problem of pain. Now, pain came not as an idea, but as a flood. And everything I had written, everything I thought I knew, I had to face again. This time, not with philosophy, but with tears. You are not too broken to be loved again. You are not too shattered to be rebuilt. I wrote those pages with trembling hands, not knowing if I still believed, not knowing if faith could survive the silence of loss. And yet, underneath it all, something endured. Not loud, not strong, but real. You are not forgotten. You are not punished. You are not the only one who has asked, "Where are you, God?" When the one I love disappears, I asked it too. I asked it with every breath. And slowly, very slowly, I realized grief is not the absence of God. It is the place He enters with the most gentleness. He did not explain Himself. He did not give me reasons. He gave me presence. And that in the end was enough. Not enough to erase the pain, but enough to redeem it, enough to carry me through. You stayed, you remained. And if you're still reading this, if you're still holding on to your thread of hope, even now you are further along than you think. Grief did not break you, it revealed you. Suffering did not steal your faith, it deepened it. And the God I thought had abandoned me was closer than ever. Not in the arguments, but in the ache. Not in the theology, but in the weeping. Not in the explanation, but in the embrace. These works, the great divorce, surprised by joy, a grief observed, they are not separate roads. They are one journey. From the ache of longing to the revelation of joy, through the silence of grief, and into the quiet confidence that love is stronger than death. You are not too late. You are not too far. You are not too weary to be renewed. You are His child. And even now, whether you are stepping into light searching for joy, or weeping in the dark, you are being held by the same hands that formed the stars and caught my tears. You stayed. You remained. And He has never stopped staying with you. Whether delivering a message, breaking chains, or standing silent in the shadows, God's work is constant. The thread of divine purpose does not snap in the darkness, nor does it unravel in delay. Even in waiting, heaven weaves. Even in silence, it speaks. Each moment, even the overlooked and ordinary, is laced with eternal weight. Heaven moves not by chance, but by calling. Nothing in the kingdom is wasted, not the heartbreak, not the longing, not the quiet acts of obedience no one sees but God. He is always working through you, around you, and sometimes in spite of you, but never apart from you. So trust in that. Stand on His word. Move with confidence, knowing who goes before you. The time for hesitation has passed. Today is holy. Today is the ground where the next miracle begins. Worship not just when you feel Him, but because He's worthy. Pray not only when you're strong, but because you're heard. Think higher. Speak bolder. Step deeper. Refuse to let fear write your story. You were not made for retreat. You were made for response. Not for reaction, but revelation. You are not drifting, you are being led. The God who called you has not changed His mind. He still sends you, still sees you, still names you His own. I see it now, a veil lifting, a light breaking through. The atmosphere has shifted, not because the world became easier, but because your spirit awakened to what was already true. The angels are nearer than you think. The glory is already moving. The assignment is active. You carry more than memory, you carry mandate. You are not just remembered, you are required. The fire in your bones was never random. The ache in your soul was never empty. It was permission. It was prophecy. And now the door stands open not to escape the world, but to enter it rightly. Go forward as one who knows they are accompanied. Walk by faith, not by sight, and know that you are never out of His reach.